And we're off on a Tuesday. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Big day on a Tuesday, as is every day, pretty much. We are in season, full throttle, and we will give you an idea here in just a few minutes of what that really means in terms of the scores, the results that have really counted and really impacted this season already. A slew of upsets, probably unlike what we've seen typically. I'm not going to say that this is a season that's completely off the charts by any stretch, because we see upsets more so than you would think. But for example, 18 double-digit upsets in 2023, 18 for the entire season, 15 weeks of college football, 18 double-digit upsets that involve power conference teams. This year, 7. We will run them down and look ahead to who could be next, who could be the next victim, who are going to be those victims coming up here in future weeks as we wrap up non-conference play and also take a look at, of course, conference games are starting to unfold across the nation. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And of course, we talked here in the last week about the changing landscape concerning the 12-team college football playoff and what that has meant to games across the country that we would not have necessarily focused on from a national standpoint that now mean a lot. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. When you shop on Amazon, please use the link that we provide. It is transparent. It completely transitions to the Amazon platform and using your account. So even though you use our link, as we demonstrated yesterday, as soon as you click on our link, it recognizes you, so you don't lose any account information, the record of your past purchases, any of that. It is completely transparent. We've tried it out 1,000 times, 587 times to be exact, with friends and family. So it is completely transparent to you. So use the Amazon link. Why send your good hard-earned money to a company that is already worth $2 trillion. We've yet to reach our first billion. We're simply millionaires here at the Voice of College Football. So we would like to hit the big B. I hope you understand the tongue-in-cheek there. All right, one last thing before we get to our first caller. We've got an Ole Miss show that we are launching on Thursday. So we're happy to announce that. Ole Miss Live, Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on our newly formed Ole Miss channel, also on the SEC channel. I don't know, maybe we'll throw it on here. We would obviously like to build that up, and that's been the winning formula in the past for these new shows, is to start them up here on the main channel and then move them on over to our team channel. So Ole Miss Live starting Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and the only way we could ever pull this off is to obviously have an excellent analyst that we have brought on the team. So we've got Leanne Herring from the Rebel Walk and myself for Ole Miss Live coming up Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So make that part of your college football calendar. All right, let's get to it right here at the Voice of College Football. We do have a caller coming in. Hello? Who's on the line? Hello?
Hello?
Hello, yes.
Hey, I have a question for you. How come most people don't seem to understand there is...
Wait a second. I missed your first few words. I apologize for that. We didn't have the audio up in my speaker.
No, it's okay.
Yes, sir. What's going on today?
How come so many people do not understand that there is not that much difference from the 25th, say, ranked team in the country and the 5th ranked team in the country, and you have to bring it every single Saturday? There's no easy outs if you're playing a Power 4 team.
Okay, I generally agree with that.
Look at OU, look at Florida State with like Boston College, but it's the same thing year after year after year. and people act shocked. And I don't understand why people would be shocked by results like that.
So I generally agree with what you're saying. I do think that there's parity in college football, and the way that I have reflected that most is a number of ways, but the one that I like to use is the ±3. So meaning I track the teams each season that either increase by at least 3 wins or decrease by at least 3 wins, which shows you the volatility of college football, that there were last season 26 teams that had at least 3 more wins from the previous season or 3 more losses, which shows that a 6-6 team can easily become a 9-3 team, or a 6-6 team can easily become a 3-9 team the next year. There's a lot of volatility. I don't know if I would stretch it all the way to the top 5 in the country, because I think the likes of Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama wouldn't tend to struggle against anybody that's 30 rungs lower.
Well, I'm an OU fan, but like even last year, I'm gonna poke on like Texas. They barely beat Houston last year, barely beat TCU.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, etc.
You're right.
And they were one of the top 4. Like you can get the dirty, nasty games where we don't have to do this. Injuries over here, you know what I mean? And then like you lose. I think Georgia's probably the most immune to that this year, and Ohio State, excuse me. But I don't understand why people are like shocked by like Notre Dame losing or OU being in a dogfight with Houston into the fourth quarter, or Alabama pulling out late in the second half of the fourth quarter. I mean, these games happen every single year. Or LSU through the third quarter, a 1-score game. Like it happens every single year.
Yeah.
And
every week, every year.
every week, every year.
Right.
And then like people like over, oh, the sky's falling. Well, did the sky fall for Alabama last year when they got in the nasty fight with USF last year? No, they still made the playoff.
Yeah.
We just need to give it like a couple more weeks.
No, it's a great point. You're totally on it. When the top 10 came out, the preseason top 10, I did a video and I showed that over the past 5 years, how many top 10 teams didn't even finish ranked, let alone finish in the top 10, finish ranked. And there were 2 consecutive years where 4 of the top 10 one year and 5 of the top 10, it's not that they didn't just fell out of the top 10, they didn't finish ranked at the end of the year.
Yeah, but I just don't understand. I think it's the media. And with like the NIL and stuff like that, this is merely my opinion. I think college football is going to die because it is just now who has the most money. They have already lowered the academic standards to allow them in. They change schools all of the time. There'll be like more parity for a while, but then once people are like, well, I'm gifting all of this money and we're still not winning, the money will dry up. And I think college football is on it's dead. The students without a waiver could not get into university to begin with. And then the money will dry up because you can only have so many winners for the rest. Through greed, I think we killed the sport.
So when you say it's going to be dead, do you mean it's not going to exist in its current state, or it's just going to be completely abolished?
By dead, the cash cow was dead. It'll just be the minor leagues for the NFL and a few teams.
But actually, we're headed toward a era here where, so I agree with you from a philosophical standpoint. I agree with you from a cultural standpoint that the college football that we grew up with, that we love, and all those conference affiliations, we've already seen those broken down, and the fabric of the sport, the regionality of the sport, the amateur status of the sport, all that broken down, obliterated to a large degree. However, the sport is making more money than it ever has, and this 12-team playoff seems to be a good move financially.
Well, what's going to happen 4 years from now? Let's say, like, I'm an OU fan, right?
Yep.
Let's say BV's not the coach. Can't get the offense right. You know what I mean? We turn into Iowa. Good defense, but can't score, right?
Okay.
Okay. 3 years from now, a coach later, why should they keep giving money? Or Texas A&M with all of their money that they get, but if the Aggies are going to Aggie in 7-5, the money dries up like for them. Because why would the boosters pay for mediocrity? Or you could look at like Florida or Ohio State or the Alabama coach doesn't come through.
Sure.
What's the long term? What's the 10-year plan? Yeah, it makes a lot of money now because it's new, but what's the long term plan when we've stripped everything away that made it great?
So what was the incentive of boosters at Texas A&M, since they haven't won a national championship since 1939 or a conference championship since 1998? What was their incentive before in giving a lot of money that was not as obviously given straight to the players, but in regards to under the table at times to the players and to facilities and to buildings and to fundraising and everything that they have done in the past? So in theory, I understand what you're saying, that, yeah, if I'm a booster and I gave $1 million here and $1 million there, and we went and got this 5-star quarterback, and we went and got this guy, and then the coach doesn't know what he's doing, and I don't like the way the football program's run, and we keep going 7-5, 6-6, even though I've shelled out all this money, and this kid was supposed to be phenomenal, but he turned out to be a bust. Yeah, I understand individual frustration, and that's going to dry up in certain avenues, but it's a large economy. It is a massively large economy in the United States that expands by the day. So I always think that there are going to be outlets to draw from.
Well, I'm not so much worried about the big dogs. Like, for example, Nebraska has went through hell for 20 years, excuse me.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And they're still there. I'm more worried about the Texas Tech, Mississippi States,
sure,
the Pittsburghs, the Syracuses, the Illinois of the world. That, like, we expanded it to get more teams in because the same teams were getting in every single year under the 4-team. Same as most of the time it was the same 2 teams or the 4 teams in the BCS era, that we're just going to wind up with around basically the NFL minor league.
Yeah, and that could be where it's headed.
With a couple of things, and everyone's just going to be a G5, and there's just going to be a few good schools that have the deepest pockets.
Well, Dan, I appreciate the call. And there's a lot more to unravel here. We've got our first guest here, but I appreciate your call.
No, I really appreciate you, Mark. You have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Dan. Yes, tons of stuff to talk about there in regards to the future of college football, which, of course, we have talked the entire off season about. So many things to explore concerning the health of the sport and whether it's going to survive. And but we've got games being played now. And we got Kentucky's Kevin McGuffey on the line. Last word on college football. And unfortunately for the Cats, they did play a game at home this past Saturday, and one of those upsets that we were just talking about that many people were surprised about. Kentucky pushing a 10-point favored status, and they got blitzkrieged in the second half, Kevin.
Yeah, there's there's no good way to sugarcoat it. Saturday was just pretty much a disaster, and I don't think a whole lot of people saw it coming. I didn't. I thought Kentucky, excuse me, I thought Kentucky would probably win and actually cover the spread. You know, you and I talked like a couple weeks ago about how Kentucky, you know, especially in the non-conference games, never covers the spread. But I was going to come out of the gate 2 weeks in a row say they covered it, but it just to use a term that Coach Stoops uses is a total systems failure, and that's basically like the entire. You know, they couldn't do anything. Run the ball. They ran the ball well. Probably should have ran the ball a little bit more. There was one stretch in the game where they ran 18 straight times, and running between the tackles, they were actually getting some good yardage, making some strides, but then ended up having to settle for a couple field goals. And then as soon as they went back to trying to pass, Kentucky's offensive line had no answer for South Carolina's defensive front, led by the I'll say it, remarkable freshman Dylan Stewart, and they had no answer. Vandegrift was, running for his life. If anybody watched that game on Saturday, and then they brought in, he banged up his shoulder a little bit during the Southern Miss game, and so after he threw that pick six, they took him out, put Gavin Wimsatt in. He ran the ball pretty well, got like 45 yards, but again threw an interception down and close to the goal line, and yeah, that was it. So it's one of those, bury it, bury the game, bury the shovel, and oh yay, now we got Georgia coming in this weekend.
Yeah. Well, do we have any idea if Brock Vandegrift's going to be okay for this Saturday?
Yeah, I think he's fine. I mean, I think he could have, if it wasn't 31-6, and there was probably no hope of winning. I think if it was a close game, he would have stayed in. And he wants to play this game because that's one of the storylines going into this game. You got Brock Vandegrift and you've got Jamin Dumas-Johnson, two guys who transferred from Georgia last year to Kentucky, playing against their old school. That's one of the that's one of the storylines heading into this game on Saturday night at 7:30 on ABC. So I think he'll play. One thing to note, when they released the depth chart yesterday, Chip Trainin was not listed at running back. They honestly had hoped he was going to be back for South Carolina, but obviously didn't play. Then the thought was for Georgia, but he's not listed. Was not listed on the depth chart. It was a Demi, and who's done, by the way, Demi Sumo-Karmbe has done a really, really good job the last 2 weeks heading that rushing attack. And then the true freshman, Jason Patterson, that you and I have talked about as well. But Chip was not on the list on the depth chart for this week. So it's unlikely, I guess, now that we have that those injury reports that they have to do like they do, in the NFL, I guess we'll know for sure on Wednesday. I think that's the day when you so if he's
for the SEC.
Yeah, for the SEC. So we'll know for sure tomorrow, but I would say he's probably not going to play again. But anyway, let's get ready for Georgia. Hey, stranger things have happened. Northern Illinois went in and beat Notre Dame. Any given Saturday, anything can happen, right? Let's try to stay positive.
Let's stay positive. Let's stay positive about the Big Blue Wall. So we talked about this during the offseason a number of times about the offensive line. That was the pride and joy of this Kentucky program, one of the aspects, along with the defense when they had their best seasons. And then it wasn't up to standard the last few years, but there was expected to be a strong offensive front, and they did not show up on Saturday.
Now, that's about the best way. The best way you could put it. There's just a dismal showing. They did have for parts of the game, Gerald Mincy and Jagger Burton, two of the starters were out for periods of time during the game, but still, no matter who they brought in, they just had no answer. It's been very, very disappointing, that aspect of the game, Saturday, because as I said, we going into it, you can say that for many, say this for any game, of course, but whoever wins that battle up front is likely going to take the game. And like I said, South Carolina just absolutely dominated, and everybody's kind of wondering what's going on here. They brought in these guys from the transfer portal, got all these starters back. Something, at least for Saturday anyway, something just did not click. And I guess you maybe give the credit to Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks for their game plan. I just don't think, Stoops said after the game, said our game plan wasn't what it should have been, all of that. So, but yeah, the Big Blue Wall been a little shaky so far in 2024, and us, the Big Blue Nation, can only hope that the ship rights itself pretty quickly, or we're going to be, we could be looking at a season where that bowl streak gets snapped. I mean, I still have like our latest bowl projections probably will be coming out shortly after we get done here. I do still have Kentucky. I know, shocking. Still have Kentucky in a bowl game, so got them playing in the Liberty Bowl against Central Florida. But right now, you got to look at that path to 6 wins. You would think, you beat Ohio University, beat Murray State. You would hope that you'd beat Vanderbilt. They have Vanderbilt and Auburn at home, so that's 5. And then you've got Florida, who they've had great success with recently, and you've got Louisville. So, there's and as Stoops mentioned in his press conference yesterday, the joys of the new SEC schedule, the new top 25 zone. I think Kentucky plays 4 of the top 6 teams. So. So they got Georgia at home, but then they go to Ole Miss, they go to Texas, Tennessee. So yeah, could be some rough sledding. But like I said, get through Saturday and see what happens the rest of the season.
Kevin McGuffey, last word on college football. Check out Kevin's bowl predictions coming out later this week and everything that's provided there at the last word on college football, one of our favorite stops. So, Kevin, yeah, you started to play the game that I was going to lead us to, because Kentucky is unfortunately one of those programs where you kind of chart out where's the path to, let's say, it looks like 8-4, because these are the wins, these are the losses, these are the 50-50s. And South Carolina was supposed to be one of those wins. And now we'll play one of the other early season college football games that everyone plays. Oh, wow, that happened. Does that mean Kentucky's no good, or does that mean South Carolina's a lot better than we thought? Oh, well, South Carolina only beat Old Dominion by 4 points. That doesn't look good, but it's only 2 games for everyone at this point. So we're still playing that wait and see who's really good, or who played a team on an off week, or what's the story.
Right. And that's the thing about it. As you said, it's just week 2. Everyone was very excited about, the first week win over Southern Mississippi. The game, it was only a little over 2 quarters. So you didn't have a huge sample size to go with from that game. But, Kentucky did a lot of good things in that game. Now, who knows? Southern Miss has not been that good the last few years. But then, as you said, South Carolina barely beat Old Dominion, who was picked, I think, near the bottom in their conference. And just for whatever reason, Shane Beamer just seems to have Kentucky's number right now. So it's 3, that whole UK South Carolina series has been one of streaks, because, South Carolina won like 13 of 14 from 2000 to 2013 or something like that. And then Kentucky won 7 of 8, and now South Carolina's won 3 in a row. So, but go back to your point, that's one of those games before the season that Kentucky looks at the schedule and says that's a game that we should win and that we have to win. South Carolina looks at that game and says this is a game that we have to win and a game that we think we can win. And we still don't know for sure, but if you remember back to last year, they were talking about when the permanent scheduling happens that it's likely that Kentucky and South Carolina end up as permanent rivals. So from the Kentucky standpoint, they need to get back on the smiling side of the scoreboard in this series, because, as you said, now that road to 6 wins got a whole lot tougher by losing that game on Saturday.
I'll tell you what I expect to see. I expect to see South Carolina. So this is another measuring stick. They're playing LSU. Is LSU great? Probably not. But are they really good? Yes. They lost to USC in the last play of the game. Now people have seemed to, okay, they lost, dismiss them. But their season's not dead. LSU's still a good team. And again, they took that game down to the final play.
Right.
So how does South Carolina measure up against LSU? Another good data point. The Kentucky-Georgia, Kentucky's had really good teams and lost to Georgia by 4 touchdowns. So
Right.
I don't know if that's going to be a great barometer, but if Kentucky's able to make it a game, then I'm going to have a little bit more faith in what's going on in Lexington. Yeah. And I'm going to keep going back to Mark Stoops' comments at SEC Media Days that they're proud of what they've accomplished in lifting this program from one of the worst programs really in the Power 5 to a consistent 7-5, 8-4, even better a couple times, but that now is the time to push through that. And that's not a great indicator, of course, on Saturday.
Right. And another point that something you and I talked about has been Kentucky's the last couple years, the inability to win home games, especially in the league. You think 2022, 2023, they went 1-3 in home games against the SEC. And I think I was trying to find the stat before I got on here. I think in their last 10, I read this somewhere, in the last 10 SEC home games, Kentucky's 2-8, which equals a mark from 2000, starting at the end of 2012 through 2015, which would have been at the end of Joker Phillips's tenure at Kentucky and the beginning of Stoops' era, when that program, as you said, was probably at about its lowest point that it's been in who knows how long. So, something, just figuring out why can't they win these home games? It's so, it's been so frustrating. And then another comment, the tying it into Georgia after the Georgia game last year, if you remember, Stoops on his radio show said, so a caller called in and said, why can't we be more competitive? And he said something along the lines, well, fans need to pony up. The pony up, I think, was his comment, with NIL money, and donate. And to their credit, the Big Blue Nation has done just that. But since that game, Kentucky, I think, is 3-6 overall, with two of those losses coming to South Carolina. The loss in the bowl game to Clemson, where they had a big lead and lost it, and I think includes a loss to Missouri, where they also got out to a big lead and then lost that game. So, I mean, I'm not saying there's we're not saying that I'm not saying there's heat on Stoops, but if we get to the end of the season and they end up 4-8, then we'll see what happens. But I think his buyout's like $44 million. So Kentucky just went through this with John Calipari. So of course he ended up just going to Arkansas. But yeah, going back to the Georgia game, I just want to. I hate to say this, but I just want to see them compete. I want to see them get out there, hustle, not play dumb football, which they played. They made a lot of not smart plays on Saturday, I thought. Get out there, make it competitive. I don't think, there's a less than 1% chance that Kentucky's going to win this game. But I want to see, I want to see some positives, even, not to sound like a coach. I want to see some positives in what's probably going to be a loss, and that things that you can take to move forward for the rest of the season. Because then you have Ohio U next week, and then you go to Ole Miss the week after that. So that'll be fun. But Kentucky always plays Ole Miss well, and their usual games are always close. But unfortunately, everything seemed to tip in the Rebels' favor the last few years. But those games have always been really good and always really tight and gone down to the wire. So But you just want to have a puncher's chance, right?
Well, there's not necessarily anything wrong, or I should say incorrect, with what Mark Stoops had to say. That's the way the game's played now with the NIL. However, we see this in politics all the time. There are things that are true, but then maybe they should be stated a certain way. And with Mark Stoops, probably needs to tread lightly on give, pony up.
Right.
Pony up, I don't think probably rubs a lot of people the right way.
Right.
And then on top of that, if you're going to pony up, and by all indications, as you said, Kentucky has done well in NIL, then you need to deliver.
Right.
So
absolutely. Like I said, I kind of miss the days of when Kentucky, the way the schedule was, and Kentucky would start 4-0, 5-1 every year, and then we get that great sense of confidence, and then you hit the gauntlet of the SEC. So I can't see Florida offering Stoops, but who knows? I mean, who knows what's going to happen? That, like I said, that's a game. Kentucky's won 3 out of 4 against Florida, and that's a game they have. We'll see what happens when we get there. But yeah, there it is. Like I said, $9 million. He signed that new deal a few years ago, I think through like 2030 or something like that. So, and I said, I think the buyout is like $44 million. So, but like I said, we're not going to get into all that right now. Just get through, like I said, get through this game Saturday, see what happens. And the biggest thing is you don't want any injuries, to help, to hurt, and then just go on with the rest of the season. And we'll see what happens. Like I said, I'm still confident that they at least get to 6 wins in a bowl game. That's obviously not what the BBN was hoping for. We got to that point with the program where we were just happy to get to 6 wins in a bowl game. But as you said, the last few years, that should be that's the ceiling, or excuse me, the floor. We should be getting to that. Expect 8 wins, 7 to 8 wins every year, and then you get the occasional, which has happened twice now, where you get the 10-win season. So, like I said, it's a tough task on Saturday, but we'll see. I'll throw out. You can throw out all the cliches you want. They have, it's why they play the game. That's why, anything can happen. So just look at Northern Illinois, right?
There it is. Kevin McGuffey, last word on college football. Kevin, we appreciate you stopping by as always, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for having me. Always enjoy it. And feel free anytime you need me, just let me know.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Enjoy
Have a
the
good
game.
day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Stepping up to the plate next, of course, Cody Stovall from All Day OK State. That's on Locked On. Cody, what's going on today?
Well, I'm feeling okay. I don't want to say that the world is my oyster, but a win is a win. And if you look back at every historic run to any sort of playoff, whether it be in the BCS era or the CFP era, there's always a couple games that just don't make any sense, right? If you look at the Auburn-Alabama Iron Bowl that Auburn won the national title, if there's not a 109-yard return, right, that never happens. Same with TCU a couple years ago. They had to come off the sidelines and kick a field goal with 2 seconds left against Baylor. Little things like that don't make sense are part of college football. So thankfully, the football gods were hanging out in Stillwater this weekend.
All right, Cody. We had an Arkansas guest on yesterday, Ty Hudson, and this is how I laid it out. I watched the game, and this is how I laid it out, and some Oklahoma State fans weren't completely on board. I'll say it nicely. We're kind of fighting against me on this one. So I thought Arkansas outplayed Oklahoma State for 3 quarters, roughly, something in that range.
Yep.
And that's reflected obviously in the scoreboard. It's also reflected in the stats. Wow. Yes. Rarely do you see a team that racks up 650 yards to 385, roughly in that range, lose a football game. However, I don't want to pin this totally on Arkansas gave this game away. Obviously, Oklahoma State stepped up, and I posted a recap video right after the game, and my first statement was, and I wasn't just looking at these two football programs based on this game, but it's a trend. There are some teams that know how to win games. There are some teams that know how to lose games. And so this is a trend with Arkansas, and it's a trend with Oklahoma State. That Oklahoma State stays in the running for Big 12 championships because they know how to win games. Their coach has been doing it forever, and he knows how to win games. And so, yes, did Arkansas gift them at times? Yeah, usually when you're up pushing 3 touchdowns, you're going to have to gift the other team to get back in the ball game. But Oklahoma State started making plays, especially in the passing game, and got opportunistic on the defensive side, and they took the game away.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it right on the head there. There was a lot of troublesome things that came out of that game, but at the end of the day, if somebody's going to give you a gift, you still have to take advantage of it, right? They could have given us 7 turnovers, but if we get 0 touchdowns out of it, then none of it matters. So points off of turnovers were critical in this game for Oklahoma State. Without the turnovers, we likely do not have the opportunity to win the ball game. But like you had mentioned, sometimes you just have to take advantage of scenarios that do swing your way, and we were able to do that.
Yeah, what I consider to be the key play of the game in a game that was very entertaining for somebody sitting on the couch that just wanted to see a good ball game.
Yeah.
I was just watching a good ball game, just a crazy ball game. That not that it was exceptionally played or anything like that, but those are usually the most fun games when they're not exceptionally played. Like there are exceptional plays, but then there are also blunders, and it makes it fun.
Yeah.
The play that Taylon Green made at quarterback, where he was circling around all over the place in the backfield, and then he finally sprinted to his left when they were up 14-0 and pointed to the guy in the end zone. Broden, the wide receiver, was holding his hand up, and he hit him right where he wanted it. And I couldn't exactly tell how much the Oklahoma State defensive back had to do with breaking up that pass, but it looked like it was contested, but it still should have been caught. And bam, you're going to 21-0 at that point, which is not impossible, but that's a tough ask versus what, 1 play later, 2 plays later, whatever it was just a couple of plays later, pick 6 the other way. You're suddenly going from 21-0 to 14-7.
Yeah, that was a massive momentum swing, and we really needed it, right? More than anything, that pick 6 was a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, which we had to figure out in the second half. Now, thankfully, we did have a very big third quarter, which is obviously what allowed us to kind of climb back in the game. But I'd say one of the things that caught my eye as far as a turning point in the game was that drop punt. And that's a credit to Hudson Clark and Pro Kick Australia, right? We got to give them credit. That is something that they do work on over there, right? Our previous Australian punter, Tom Hutton, did the same thing. And if you look at like 2021 Bedlam or 2021 Texas, he puts a funky spin on the ball. And because they came from Australia and they came from the same company, he was able to kind of help Hudson Clark implement that into this season. And we saw it. So the punter is not often viewed as a weapon, but I think ours is, and that was a good thing to see.
So now we spin ahead to Tulsa, and I got to think that, yeah, you take the win, and then you hope that the team analyzes the tape and is able to get back on the practice field and work on what went wrong or where they need to improve. And I guess the most concerning thing for me from the Oklahoma State side would be the offensive and defensive line of scrimmage results of getting pushed around, especially on the defensive front, giving up all that yardage, and Jaquindon Jackson pretty much having his way with about 150 yards rushing. That would be my biggest concern.
No, I agree completely. Our defensive line has been the most suspect thing on the season thus far. Now, from an offensive line perspective, yeah, they didn't open up any holes, which is actually very confusing because Charlie Dickey is the famous K-State dude with Colin Klein that was able to create holes and basically tell you what the play was going to be, and they were still going to get 3 or 4 yards. So it's kind of weird that Charlie Dickey is having some issues with the offensive line opening running lanes, but This is 8 or 9 of the last 12 games that nobody's touched Alan Bowman. So pass protection is absolutely phenomenal. If we can get run blocking anywhere near that, then the season is going to be as successful as we'd anticipated coming into it.
Okay, so I'm going to take that concern, and you already started to hit on it. Flip it to the other side. Ollie Gordon runs for 49 yards.
Yeah.
And he gets the 12-yarder in overtime. That was his longest run of the day, that Oklahoma State wasn't able to establish the run with arguably the best back in the country. There was one particular sequence that I thought was a bit odd where Arkansas pinned Oklahoma State inside the 5, like down near the 1-yard line, and Alan Bowman's throwing, rainbow shots down the field. And I'm thinking, now, if that would have worked, then of course it always
Right.
goes back to the result of the plays and saying,
Yeah.
you shouldn't have done that. Oh, that was a good play call to get yourself out of that. But Alan Bowman actually wasn't throwing at his best there in the first half. He got better as the game went on, and you had Ollie Gordon standing in the backfield, and they didn't even try to run him.
Well, if anybody told us before the game, Mark, that Ollie Gordon and Alan Bowman were both going to play pretty terrible football, nobody would have thought we would have had a chance. But thankfully, right, the defense, and this is crazy to say because the defense gave up like 630 yards, but the turnovers in crucial moments are something that Brian Nardo's been famous for, right? How many times have you and I had the conversation of him in the fourth quarter as a defensive coordinator is light years different than the first 3 quarters. I do not know why he does this to himself, nor do I understand why they do this to the fan base. I'm pretty sure the balding accelerated quite a bit on Saturday, as did the turning gray. I used to blame it on my kids, but now I can blame Casey Dunn and Brian Nardo.
All right, so we would think that Oklahoma State would have an easy time going to Tulsa this Saturday. However, we're looking around college football, and I'm counting up 7 double-digit upsets already. There were 18 last year in the Power 5, 7 already through 2 weeks, and so everybody's got to be on guard. So what are you expecting this week in Tulsa?
I mean, I expect a W. I expect us to play well, of course. But as you kind of already alluded to, the transfer market era, for all of the negatives that do in fact come with it, I would say that one of the few positives is the fact that it does make the parity all across the country significantly different. The only way you're going to be able to understand what a team is coming into a season predicated upon the previous season is if you have a situation like Oklahoma State where you have 55 guys returning between the senior and junior class. But that's going to be pretty rare. By and large, most everybody else in the country is bringing in 12 to 16-ish transfers a year. So you never really know who's going to pop at a different school. We've seen it time and time again. Somebody would be a backup per se at one school and they leave and they're all American. So unfortunately, as much as we all understand we should beat Tulsa, the fact that the transfer market is going to give them a few dudes that are going to be problematic for Oklahoma State does always make it somewhat worrisome any week. But if you're looking for a prediction type scenario, I do think that this is yet again another W. I would picture it in the 41-21-ish range. But, you never know anymore with the transfer market. And the fact that they're right up the road, the Turnpike Classic, Tulsa is going to be motivated, not to be disrespectful by any stretch to them, but this is basically their Super Bowl. So if they can get up for this one, then it could be a little bit of a long day.
Why does Oklahoma State bother going to Tulsa? Does that help with any kind of recruiting angle?
It helps them, I'm sure. I'm not 100% positive why this is something that we continuously do. I do indeed believe that it's something to kind of help Tulsa, but at the same time, this has been a rivalry, right? As you could say, for a long time. And because of that, we want to keep it going, especially now the fact that, we don't have any scheduling availability to play Bedlam for a while. This little trip up the road, it does make some sense. And there are a lot of recruits in Tulsa, so I'm sure it does add another layer to the recruiting aspect as well.
Cody Stovall, all day OK State on lockdown. What's going on over there these days?
I'm just trying to steadily put out content. I must admit, it's nice to be back in the football season. Numerically speaking, the numbers are so night and day different. It's almost mind blowing. But of course, we need Oklahoma State to continue to win. You can check me out every day, Locked On Oklahoma State. And yeah, man, we're doing film breakdowns, and we're trying to be the most informative out there with a little bit of fun mixed in. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how things are going thus far. So we just got to keep winning, and it makes life a lot easier.
Winning is fun, but you also have to make up your own fun sometimes because the winning's not there. So fun is a good thing. Let's all have some fun, folks. They're just games. All right, good stuff. Cody, appreciate you stopping by as always, sir.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. God bless. Go Pokes, brother.
Thanks, man. It's our guy, Cody Stovall. Again, it's Locked On All Day OK State right there. We have dropped in there we go. We have dropped in all of the links for you to call the show. We've got Chris Phillips standing by at 11 a.m. to join us to talk SEC. Chris at SEC Unfiltered. We're going to talk SEC. So I was in the midst of running down double-digit upsets in college football. 18 last year, 7 already this year through 2 weeks. Okay. Georgia Tech, Florida State, 11-point dog wins. Vandy, Virginia Tech, 13-point underdog, win the game. Boston College was a 17-point dog against Florida State. I would love to have somebody look this one up. This is one of those database deals you need to have, because if you did this manually, it would take forever. Who was the first team in college football? Who was the last team that we had before Florida State that lost as a double-digit favorite the first 2 games of the season? BYU was an 11-point dog against SMU. They won that game last weekend. Of course, the famous NIU game against Notre Dame, winning on the last-second field goal as a 29-point underdog. Cal at Auburn, a game that I got to say surprised me, and that has to be the embarrassment of the year for the SEC thus far. Cal, the school that doesn't care about football. The fans don't care. They don't have many fans. Nobody shows up at the games. They're a Pac-12 school that no longer has a conference. Yes, they are now in the ACC, but they really don't have a conference that really is affiliated with the West Coast. And you've got this Cal football team that nobody gave a chance, and they go into Auburn, self-proclaimed one of the most difficult places to play in college football, which I have always felt that. Jordan-Hare Stadium, War Eagle, and Cal goes in there and controls the game. They only win 21-14, but hey, to get out of there with a win as a 2-touchdown dog, Cal beats Auburn. And then the game we talked about with Kevin McGuffey, South Carolina, 10-point dog, beats Kentucky. That's 7 double-digit underdogs that have won. Then we've also had these scares and probably more that did not cross my mind. But in making a quick list, Oregon, Idaho, Oregon twice the next week against Boise State, of course, as a 19-point favorite, almost lost to Boise State, kicked a field goal at the gun to win it. Penn State was losing at halftime to Bowling Green as a 35-point favorite. 35. Penn State barely beats Bowling Green by 3 points. SMU had a scare against Nevada in week 1 as a 20-something point favorite, 23 points, I believe. Bama, of course, against USF. The final score looks impressive, but Bama was down a point in the fourth quarter to USF and won it going away as a 31-point favorite. Oklahoma, 27-point favorite against Houston, barely wins. Ugly fourth quarter, ugly game. I watched the fourth quarter. Oklahoma squeaks by 16-12 as a 27-point favorite. And then the game we just talked about, Oklahoma State and Arkansas, the Cowboys, a 10-point favorite, trailed by 2 touchdowns and won in overtime. Who could be next? Let's give it a look. Who could be next? upset candidates for this week. And we know that there will be upsets. There will be upsets. So let's give it a look. Bama, 16-point favorite against Wisconsin in Camp Randall Stadium. So the SEC starting to come north more often. Alabama at Wisconsin. Now, the way Wisconsin's played the first 2 weeks of the season, this does not appear to be a candidate. However, just that's in range. That is one in range right there. Missouri's got to be a substantial favorite against Boston College. Now, of course, Boston College was able to do that against the dysfunctional Florida State situation, but Missouri's going to be well ready for this one after playing 2 cupcakes. Mizzou is a 16 or 17-point favorite. Just early in this schedule, starting at noon Eastern on Saturday, we've got quite a few candidates. The next one, Tulane, Oklahoma. A 2-10 Tulane team took Lincoln Riley to the brink a few years ago in Norman. This Tulane team is much better. They really played Kansas State well. You have to admire Tulane for going out and scheduling Kansas State and Oklahoma back-to-back weeks, in addition to playing in arguably the best Group of 5 conference. So there's another possibility there for an upset. And I think out of the first 3 that we've mentioned, considering what I saw out of that Oklahoma offense last week against Houston, I would say there is your most probable upset right there. Oklahoma hosting Tulane. Ole Miss on the road at Wake Forest is a 23-point favorite. I don't really feel as though the Rebels are in trouble there. We talked Georgia, Kentucky. Georgia just looks so incredibly strong, airtight, all phases of the game, every positional unit, passing offense, rush offense, the heralded freshman, Nick Frazier, the running back, the offensive line, the defense just flying all over the place, stout up front. The defensive backfield is remarkable. Kentucky's in for it, you would think. However, Kentucky is a pretty good football team, regardless of what we saw. They're a talented football team, and they're a 23 to 24-point underdog. And those are the SEC games. Now, I thought I had all of college football here. I do not. I just have the SEC. So out of all those SEC games, I think the most likely upset candidate is Tulane taking out Oklahoma. Now, if we widen the scope all the way to all the games here, Arizona State goes to Texas State. I don't know what the line is on that game, but Arizona State, of course, impressive in their first 2 weeks. UNLV going to Kansas. Again, maybe we should pull the lines up on these games. Let's do that. Texas State is coming off a game in which they blitzed UTSA. And therefore, this line may look a little odd, but Texas State is only a 1.5-point dog at home against Arizona State. There's that UNLV game at Kansas, and that game's on Friday night. That is a candidate for an upset. Kansas lost at Illinois, and they blew a lead in the fourth quarter. UNLV played really well against Houston. They won by 3 touchdowns against the Houston team that, of course, gave Oklahoma all sorts of fits. Arizona is a full touchdown plus underdog at Kansas State. That's a Friday game. So we've got 2 decent Friday matchups that I'm going to be watching, with UNLV going to Kansas and Arizona, and Noah Fafita, who did not have a good game this past weekend against, who was it, Northern Arizona? And Kansas State had to come back from 10 down to beat Tulane. Oklahoma State a 20-point favorite against Tulsa. I don't see that as much of a candidate. Bama, for as well as they played in week 1, did not play that well last week until they kicked it into gear. And maybe I'm thinking too much Nick Saban, Alabama, and thinking just the pedigree and the... Whoa, we've got our guests here. Sorry, Chris. Did not see you there. I had another window open, but we want to get to Chris Phillips here from SEC Unfiltered. What's going on today, Chris?
What's going on, man? Doing well. I appreciate you having me, man. It's always a pleasure to chat.
Absolutely. Good to have you here. And we want to mix up the SEC here. We're going to start with your beloved Gamecocks of South Carolina, because we're talking about upsets here. And we've tracked 7 double-digit upsets already, Chris, in college football. And there were 18 in the Power 5 last year, and we've already got 7. And of course, depending on your line, your book that you go to, South Carolina was right on that edge, as about a 10-point dog against Kentucky. And they went in there and they just blew off their doors in the second half.
I mean, I think it speaks to a lot, Mark. We've just never known less about these teams than we do now, especially in these early season matchups, right? I mean, I think it's so hard for those in Vegas to handicap, and it's so hard for us to, predict what's going to happen. I mean, there's so much movement with the portal and NIL and rosters changing. I mean, we used to not have that, right? You used to know by early spring, okay, these are going to be the guys you probably knew for the next 3 to 4 years. This is going to kind of be the core nucleus of the team, and there's just so much movement now. It's hard to get a gauge for sure on what these teams are going to be. So, that's the thing. In the offseason, we talk about is the game suffering because of conference realignment, because of portal, because of NIL. But I could argue, Mark, the game's never been healthier, right? With the amount of upsets and competitive ball games. And it's as entertaining a product as it's ever been. Certainly South Carolina was right there, man. I mean, that was one that I took Kentucky in the game. I thought South Carolina could win, but I took Kentucky in the game. And, to see what the Gamecocks did a week after nearly losing to Old Dominion on their home field, just one of the more stunning results of the weekend.
So now we've got a LSU game coming up here that's gained a lot more focus nationally because of what South Carolina did on Saturday night. This is obviously an opportunity for South Carolina to show that they can have a competitive season, that it wasn't a fluke going to Kentucky. Maybe Kentucky's not as good a team as we thought, but now we've got a matchup against LSU. And despite what happened against USC, that was obviously a game that came down to the final play. I know LSU is a good team, and South Carolina can really show us something, of course, if they're able to pull this one out.
Yeah, it would be a huge win and a huge feather in the cap for Shane Beamer. And, all that talk of maybe his seat is warming up, or God forbid, is he going to be on the hot seat by season's end? Mark, I think all of that would virtually disappear if South Carolina is able to go out there and get a win. It's also a massive game for Brian Kelly from the LSU perspective, Mark. I mean, I've seen LSU folks go as far as to say it's the most important game of his tenure to this point. I mean, you think about some of the games they've played and, how big of a deal that is, right? To say that. I mean, they've played in some really big games since he's been there. So I think for South Carolina, they're going to have to be better offensively. I just don't think you can count on every single week the defense is going to be able to, to bail you out and go win the game. LSU, we know, is very capable offensively. They've struggled to run the football, though, which has been really interesting. I think, Mark, this is almost a battle of which offense can find balance, right? I mean, neither have been great. LSU's obviously been much better. They've got, I would say, far superior weapons to South Carolina. For South Carolina, it's can they run the football? And you're going up against an LSU front. You lose Jacoby and Guillory. There should be opportunities maybe for Rocket Sanders to have his breakout game. I do think LSU is better defensively under Blake Baker this year, but there's still so many questions with them we just don't have answers to. So the spread right now, I think in this game is still at 7 points. I am picking LSU in this football game. I think you could consider it a coin flip, but I'm going to go with LSU. I just think in a game where explosive plays are going to matter, and I don't know that South Carolina, again, I'm saying this for the second straight week, but I just don't think they have the offense to keep up with LSU. Now, their defense is fantastic, and maybe the defense goes back out there and wins them another game, but this is their greatest test yet. I think LSU could present some problems in the vertical passing game with Kyron Lacey and the rest of those weapons they've got on the outside, C.J. Daniels, Xavion Thomas. My big question is, can LSU run the football? Again, they just haven't done it at any point this season with Caleb Jackson and Josh Williams. And, that great offensive line that we talk about with LSU, who's been so good in pass pro, just have not been able to get a run push. So there's certainly a path for South Carolina to win, but I went LSU in this game 27-20. I think it'll be a really close, competitive back and forth game, but I'm going to take the Tigers to win.
When they did get a run push against USC, that was with John Emery getting much of the yardage downfield, and unfortunately he's been lost for the season. So LSU loses what was a former 5-star that looked to be finally breaking through. Brian Kelly made a comment this week that Garrett Nussmeier, I don't know if it was in some type of response defending Garrett Nussmeier during his news conference, but he said something about he's on pace to throw 45 or 50 touchdowns and we'll probably need every one of them. I don't know if that was an indictment on his defense not improving under Blake Baker, because that's what obviously was needed last year.
I mean, it's certainly, I think the defense is better. I think also maybe he's challenging the defense a little bit. But you look at them, Mark, in week 1, and I know week 2 against Nichols, there was it was a little bit sloppy here and there. I mean, gave up a significant amount of yardage on the ground. Again, that's my biggest concern with them, is just interior defensive line and the run defense as a whole. I think Harold Perkins Jr. is a fantastic player, but I think Brian Kelly likes to send messages, Mark. I think he likes to send messages to his team, and I think that was one that, here's the thing. I think that should be the mentality of LSU. Like, the defense is going to be better this year. I feel confident in saying that. Watching them week 1, I mean, I think it was very easy to see that defensive product, it wasn't perfect, but it was far superior to what you had last year. But I think LSU's got to continue to stay aggressive. What was so maddening to me, Mark, in that game week 1, LSU played like they had a 14-point lead the entire game. Like, they kind of they were on their heels. They weren't the aggressor. I didn't feel like they really took the fight to USC, if you will, in that game, and conservative play calling in the second half. Like, I think that's what LSU needs to be, is very aggressive. Again, pushing the football down the field, asking Garrett Nussmeier to go out there and, like Brian Kelly said, throw 40 touchdowns, right? If he needs to do it, he needs to do it. But I think that's going to be the best version of LSU. They've got to play as the aggressor, Mark, because, again, their backs are against the wall. I mean, you talk about a 12-team college football playoff. They lose this game to South Carolina, you can virtually count them out. They've still got Ole Miss on the schedule. They've still got Alabama on the schedule. They've still got Texas A&M on the road on the schedule where they struggle to win. So you got to have this South Carolina game to have any shot at the college football playoff. And I think the way LSU wins this game is they've got to be the aggressor. They cannot be passive.
Yeah, you're alluding to a situation in that game. There was about 7 or 8 minutes left, and LSU had a 1-score lead, and it looked like they were just about to put their foot on the throat. And they had a couple opportunities to make it a 2-score game, and nobody's ever confused USC with being a mentally tough team in recent years. And they weren't able to get the job done. And for a third consecutive year, Brian Kelly loses an opening game. We got Chris Phillips on the line from SEC Unfiltered. Chris, what's going on there at SEC Unfiltered these days?
We're staying busy, man. Obviously, in the season, we're dropping all of our game previews early in week. I do a weekly Monday call-in show as well, noon to 1. That's a lot of fun, taking questions, comments, calls. We're staying active on social media, X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you get your content. We're there constantly pumping out content. The podcast, YouTube, like I mentioned, staying active. It's a lot of game previews. It's a lot of reaction stuff. My good friend Dave Shoemate, who's one of our contributors, he goes live on Monday and Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. Saturday, we do reactions to all of the big games. So you'll see us live on Saturdays as well. And then Sunday mornings, we're doing our Sunday Fun Day reaction show, about an hour 15 or so at 10 a.m. Eastern, or right around that time. So Mark, we're staying busy, as I'm sure you are. It's a lot of fun, man. It's a lot of content bleeding out of the eyeballs, like I say, but it's a great time, man. And we're actually getting to talk football on the field and break down games. And again, as you know, we wait so long to do that, so we're enjoying every second of it.
Chris, is Tennessee as good as what they showed us on Saturday night against NC State?
I think they are. Yeah, I think Tennessee's for real. Now, I'm not saying they're going to go undefeated or win the SEC, but no, I had them as a college football playoff team before the season. I had them at 10-2, locking in their spot in the playoff, and I feel really confident about that pick. And you know what's crazy, Mark? I actually had them 10-2 with a loss to Oklahoma. So if those two teams played this week, I would be taking the Volunteers. There's no question. So I think Tennessee is absolutely a 10 or 11 win team. I think they've got the makings of that. They've got some tests down the road. Alabama will come to town. They're going to have to go to Georgia along with the rest of the SEC slate. Florida is never an easy game for them, even with what Florida is this year. But no, Tennessee's for real. I mean, they're find the holes. You know, I mean, I think secondary will probably continue to be the question for them, but they're so good in the front seven defensively. That's where my optimism came, Mark. We knew they'd be good offensively, right? I mean, Nico is the right trigger man for Josh Heupel. The offensive line is stout. The running back room is stout. The wide receiver room is full of electric playmakers. So, you know, they've got everything on the offensive side you need. And I think what's scary is we probably haven't even seen – I know we haven't seen the best version of Nico Iamaleava. But on the defensive side, that front seven was why I was really, really excited about Tennessee and optimistic about them. And, I mean, the way they just throttled NC State, Mark. I mean, was NC State a little bit overrated? How does NC State stack up to some of the SEC competition they'll see? I mean, that's debatable, but I think NC State's a quality team, and they made them look totally incompetent. So, yeah, Josh Heupel and company, they're a force to be reckoned with. And again, I feel really, really good about my pick in the preseason. They'll be in the college football playoff.
Chris, I'm right there with you because we may see NC State step into the ACC and be ultra competitive and possibly compete for a championship. Dave Doran typically has them at 8-4, 9-3 in that range. And I know they struggled against Western Carolina, but with Grayson McCall at the controls, I would not be surprised if they had a decent season like they do each and every year. And for Tennessee just to completely just drag them around the field, and you just sized up the offense. The offense could be the best in the nation when it's all said and done as Nico continues to improve and all those weapons all over the place. And they may have 2025's number one pick in the NFL draft, James Pierce, leading that defense. What do you make of Bama going to Wisconsin? That's one of those interesting non-conference matchups. I don't know if Wisconsin's up to it, but of course, Bama rolled in week one. And it's only Western Kentucky, but they don't typically lose by 60 points. So that was ultra impressive. But then they messed around with South Florida for a second consecutive year before they kicked it into gear.
Yeah, I don't think any Bama fans want to see South Florida on the schedule ever again, Mark. Those games have just been anything but comfortable. Bama looked really average for three quarters and looked like one of the best teams in the country in the fourth quarter, the way they exploded and pulled away in that game. I do have Alabama winning this game. I mean, listen, I think – it'll be interesting. Kalen DeBoer's first road game. I don't think Wisconsin has the pieces to hang around and make this a fourth quarter game. I think the crowd will be raucous. We know what to expect from Camp Randall. I don't really trust Tyler Van Dyke all that much. Phil Longo's offense there, the quote unquote air raid, if you will. I think for Alabama, I'm curious to see the run game with Justin Haynes and Jam Miller. And I thought, seeing the run game kind of come together, the offensive line get a push. I mean, they had their moments where they weren't great, but physicality will be important in this game, obviously, as it is each time you play somebody from the Big Ten. But I think Alabama pulls away in this one late. I've got them winning this game by 2 scores, 14 points. I don't know that they cover. I won't be surprised if Wisconsin covers in this game. But I do have Alabama winning. I think, the first road test of the Kalen DeBoer era will go well. But listen, you got to avoid those self-inflicted wounds. I mean, double-digit penalties, again, Mark, turnovers. You cannot do that in Madison. You go on the road and do that. You're going to be in a fourth-quarter fight. And, you get to that point, Wisconsin's not going to know they're not supposed to win the football game, right? So, things could go sideways, but I think Bama will clean it up. I think they'll play a much more clean game, and I think they will get the win.
Chris Phillips, SEC Unfiltered, a destination for all of you to track the SEC top to bottom. And while Florida was an embarrassment against Miami in week one in what was supposed to be a close game, I think that the embarrassment for this conference is Auburn's performance last week against Cal. not just from a football standpoint, but from the standpoint that we've got this Cal school where we think of Cal being more concerned with a lot of other things besides football, having a dwindling, non-existent fan base, playing in front of nobody on the West Coast, and now having to play in this, out of place league where they're traveling across the country constantly to play their games. And they show up at what's supposed to be one of the most difficult places to play in all of college football against an Auburn team that got a lot of buzz during the offseason as, wow, this could be Hugh Freeze, second year, gets the passing game together, and they break through. And Cal beat them by a touchdown, but I don't even know if the game was that close.
It wasn't. And I'll tell you this, Peyton Thorne, I can't for the life of me, Mark, understand why Hugh Freeze has hitched his wagon to Peyton Thorne. I think it is very obvious right now what needs to be done. At some point, you just know what you have, Mark. And I'm not saying that Peyton Thorne is going to be as bad as he was Saturday against Cal the entire season, but that's his floor. And I think what's scary, Mark, is to know that each Saturday you might get that version of him. And it's going to hold Auburn back from reaching their ceiling this season. So, listen, they've got New Mexico this week. They're going to win the football game, but I'll be curious, do we see Hank Brown? Do we see Hugh Freeze at minimum get Hank Brown in the football game, get him ready for SEC play? Because I don't think just hitching the wagon to Peyton Thorne and riding him out is the way to go. 4 interceptions in the game against Cal. There were other problems defensively. I thought they were a little bit sloppy, obviously in the open field tackling, what have you, but nobody, Mark, and I mean nobody, saw that coming. I talked to Auburn people last week. They scoffed at the idea they could lose that game. Really, truly. The conversation was, will they cover? The conversation was never, is Auburn going to win? So, very humbling for the Tigers, for sure. It's funny, Mark, in the preseason, I picked Arkansas to beat Auburn in Jordan-Hare, and I was labeled a crazy person for that. And if those two teams played this week, and maybe when we talk about that game next week, I think there's going to be some out there that are picking the Hogs. So, there wasn't a more disappointing team, arguably in all of college football, than Auburn in week 2. A team with such high expectations. Many were expecting 8+ wins. And, now you find yourself behind the 8 ball and you got a quarterback I don't know that this fan base trusts. And I don't blame him because I don't trust Peyton Thorne either.
This was such a deep quarterback class in the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. And with these coaches making so much money, Hugh Freeze included, that's one of the things that they are paid to do, is to be able to evaluate their quarterback room and say, we've got the guy here, or we need to go get the guy. And I think Michigan missed it. Clemson may have missed it, although that's not what they do, of course, go to the transfer portal. And Auburn missed it in regards to looking at the likes of Cam Ward, KJ Jefferson, Will Rogers, all sorts of guys, Dylan Gabriel, Will Howard, tons of guys switched teams, and Auburn just stayed pat.
Yeah, it just, again, I heard a lot of people say this offseason, Mark, that Auburn was more than a quarterback away. Well, I understand that. You're more than a quarterback away from competing for the college football playoff. You're maybe not more than a quarterback away from competing for 8 or 9 wins. And every win matters. Year 2 of Hugh Freeze's tenure. So I, for the life of me, don't understand it. It was a risk, obviously, by Hugh Freeze. He's taken over the offense this year, and you felt like, well, if there's anybody that can get the most out of this kid, it's going to be Hugh Freeze. And the way they upgraded, Mark, the wide receiver position, it kind of made you feel like that maybe there was hope there. But at some point, man, people show you who they are, and it's your job to believe them when they show you. And Peyton Thorne has shown you who he is. So there were options out there. I don't know why they didn't make any moves and go out and get a quarterback, and they're kind of having to pay for it right now.
All right, Chris, appreciate you being here as always. Everybody catch Chris at SEC Unfiltered. Chris, thanks so much.
Yeah, appreciate you having me, man. It's always a pleasure anytime. I really love doing this, and looking forward to another entertaining weekend of SEC and college football for sure.
Absolutely. Chris, have a good one. Appreciate you being here, man.
Take care, man. Appreciate it.
All right. We will wrap it up here at the Voice of College Football. Of course, it's an loaded Wednesday schedule here. Next stop is Iowa Live. That's at 5:30. We have the Nebraska show at 7. So again, Iowa Live at 5:30 Eastern. That's with Corey Brada and myself on the Iowa channel. Nebraska Live at 7. Justin Adams hosts there. Biggest 12 with Clint Foster at 7:30 Eastern. Michigan Live at 8. USC Live at 10. Did you get all that? The best way to track that is to go to our community page each and every day where we post the schedule for the Voice of College Football right here. Glad everybody could stop by. We did a little overtime today, and that was a freebie for you. And don't forget that we've got our premiere of Ole Miss Live coming up Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with Leanne Herring and myself. Iowa Live at 5:30. That's just about 6 hours away. See you then. College football is even more exciting with some action on the line. And the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Let's start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread. I've got a 40-year track record. In fact, in 2023, at $100 played per game, you would have netted over $9,300. And guess what? I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill, our ace in the hole, show stopper from Wager Talk. 6 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick, which went 21-5 against the spread the last 2 seasons. I repeat, 21-5 against the spread. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Steve Dace and Matt Zemek. Become a YouTube channel member or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2024 a winner now.